I had a discussion with a work colleague several years ago regarding the beginnings of the Sabbath. His view was that the Sabbath was not instituted until God gave the Ten Commandments to Moses at Mount Sinai. This view is commonly held by many people today, but there are some Bible passages that seriously undermine the validity of this view. In Genesis 2, after giving an account of the creation, the Bible says, "On the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made." If we take any part of the creation account to be literal, then we need to take the whole of it as literal. And if we can't explain away any parts of the creation account, then we can't explain away this plain statement that God instituted the Sabbath at the end of the original creation week. The blessing and sanctifying of the seventh day are mentioned in connection with the very first seventh day that ever existed. In doing so, the Bible reinforces the idea that this is the point at which the Sabbath was instituted. In the commandment given to Moses, God's resting on the seventh day is given as the reason for its sanctification. The Ten Commandments were given to Moses over 2,000 years after the creation. It makes no sense that the reason for keeping the Sabbath existed 2,000 years before the Sabbath was instituted and kept. For these reasons, we must conclude that the Sabbath was instituted and God required its observance immediately after the work of creation ended. We find frequent references in the Bible before Sinai to the 7-day week. Noah had an understanding of the 7-day week. We see this in his sending the dove from the ark. Noah waited 7 days each time before resending the dove from the ark. After Laban deceived Jacob, Laban asked Jacob to wait 1 week before marrying Rachel. Joseph mourned for 7 days after his father died. Job's friends sat with him for 7 days. If people before the time of Moses understood and observed the 7-day week, they had to have gotten that idea from the creation. If they observed a 7-day week because of their understanding that God created the world in 7 days, then we can conclude that they also kept the Sabbath day, the seventh day, holy as part of the observance of the 7-day week cycle. The God who gave them the 7-day week also gave them the seventh-day Sabbath when he gave them the 7-day week. While living in Egypt, the Israelites could not keep the Sabbath because they were forced to work on the Sabbath by the Egyptians. God's plan was to revive Sabbath keeping after freeing them from Egypt, and one of the ways he did this was through the miracle of the manna from heaven in the desert. God sent manna from heaven for 6 days of the week. On the 7th day, there was none. The Israelites were to collect manna every day of the week for their consumption. On the 6th day, they were to collect a double portion so that they had enough for the Sabbath. This demonstrated that 6 days were for working and the 7th day was for resting. The manna would rot if kept overnight from day 1 to 5, but manna collected on day 6 would not rot if kept overnight for the Sabbath. But some Israelites were disobedient. The Bible says, "And it came to pass that there went out some of the people on the 7th day to gather, and they found none. And the Lord said unto Moses, How long refuse ye to keep my commandments and my laws? See, for that the Lord hath given you the Sabbath, therefore he giveth you on the 6th day the bread of 2 days." God saying, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws?" implies that God had previously established the Sabbath. This miracle of the manna was given also before God gave Moses the 10 Commandments at Sinai. The account of manna is given in Exodus 16, while the 10 Commandments are given in Exodus 20. God saying, "The Lord hath given you the Sabbath," prior to Sinai, settles the question that the Sabbath originated long before God wrote the commandment on the tables of stone.